So today we are going to have a discussion about Quant and the QNT project. Now, this is one that I did previously have my eye on, but it just kind of dropped off of my radar a little bit. It was in a time period where I wasn't really researching into projects properly. I didn't understand how to research into them. And I was just investing in the coins that everybody was talking about at the time, so I never made any progress with it. So for the new market investors, let's dive into what Quant is, what they are building, and how this could end up being a really good investment for the long term. So Quant is a blockchain interoperability network and operating system, and it first came out in 2018. So it was originally designed to help bridge the gap between various different blockchains and enterprise software, and it does this by using a simple plug-and-play solution, so it doesn't require the team to deploy any new infrastructure for it. So it uses a continually expanding list of DLT and API connectors and to allow different blockchains to communicate with one another via Quant's Overledger API gateway. So DLT, for anybody who doesn't know, it is distributed ledger technology, and this is a decentralized database, and it's managed by multiple participants across multiple different nodes. So the information on the ledger is updated by those who are participating in the network rather than a central authority for it. And API, this is application programming interfaces, and it's basically a set of rules that describe how two applications interact with each other. Sitting in between the networks and the applications that run on them, the Overledger makes it possible to run multi-chain applications, or MDApps. And this supports blockchains such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, and Avalanche, just to name a few for you. So how does it all work? And this is the part that I really love to look into and try and understand the more technical side of it. So the Quant network is able to do this thanks to the Overledger protocol that is built on 4 separate layers. So we have the transaction layer, messaging layer, filtering and ordering layer, and the application layer. So with the transaction layer, this stores transactions that have been verified using distributed ledger technology. And the messaging layer, it is a shared channel where transactions from all of the ledgers are recorded, and which is divided into separate ledgers. And this layer pulls all transaction-related information, including the smart contract data and messaging digests, from each ledger in the transaction layer. The transaction layer is unaware of the contents of the messaging layer, since the information about the transactions is wrapped, and this allows all transactions from all ledgers to be combined. So the third layer is the filtering and ordering layer, and in this layer the messages are extracted and built from the transaction information, and those only referenced in the transaction through a hash that is exchanged out of the chain are then filtered and ordered. And this layer also makes sure that the messages comply with the application's needs and the plan. So for instance, a program can require a specific quantity of coins be moved for a transaction to be acceptable, or it might only allow transactions to or from a certain address. And the fourth and final layer is the application layer. So this layer assumes control over all of the other layers by establishing the guidelines and methods for interacting with the blockchains. So each multi-chain application is segregated from the others in this layer. So to use Overledger, applications must have 2 sets of rules. So one is a requirement and one is optional, and these specify how to communicate with others and programs on the Overledger system. So applications can then interact with one another by sending messages via the messaging layer, and these messages can pass from the filtering and ordering layer to the application layer if they comply with the filtering requirements of the other application. So if we take a look at QNT on the yearly chart, you can see that QNT took an absolute beating through the whole bear market pretty much. They've had a serious struggle with other projects coming out that are offering similar alternatives they've had a serious struggle with other projects that are coming out with similar ideas for interoperability solutions, and they then started a focus on the central bank digital currency, which I don't think it harmed it, but it didn't increase it at the time because nobody's really a fan of the central banks. But if we look at it over all time, we can see that it did have a previous all-time high of $378, $379, and this was back in September of 2021. So it does have the potential there. It also hit, you can see this little second peak, almost like a little second run in 2022 in October, where it hit again 193 after being down at 54. So it does make good comebacks. And if we take a look at the market cap, so the market cap is currently at just over 1.4 billion, and it's got a trading volume of 15 million in the last 24 hours, which I think is quite low for it, but it's not too bad. And one of the good things about Quant is that it does have a fixed maximum supply. So there will only ever be 14.8, 14.9 million QNT in the total supply. So that is a good thing because it gives it that sort of scarcity supply almost. There has been a fair bit of a buzz around QNT as it has been testing support levels recently. If you look at it over the monthly chart, it's actually green. We can see that it did have a little run here which I think is when everybody got super excited about it again because it was the most movement it had all year, really. But ultimately, it has come back down just now. It's had a little bit of a retracement back down to, we're at $119 just now. So, but it is to be expected when it has a surge like that for it to retrace a little bit. So, some of the positives of QNT, so what we just went over, for example, is that it has a lower market cap compared to most of the competitors in this same kind of niche. So, another factor to consider is Quant's strong tokenomics. So, over 80% of its supply is already in circulation, and MDApps developers must use Quant to pay the gateway operations for resources. So the resources include things like the APIs, data, the use of the distributed ledger, etc. So as there's more adoption of this, it will drive the price up ultimately. Now, as always, for the sake of balance, there are a few negatives. And although there isn't a great deal of bad news around QNT, I think that's kind of one of the things that was a downside for the community, was that there was no bad news, was that there was no good news, but there was also no bad news. So there was just nothing really happening, which I think caused this little bit of stagnation that we can see here, where it just kind of went horizontally. But the main downside that I have found for this is that since the centralized exchanges are a major part in the interoperability space, the strength of an exchange does determine the safety of your QNT tokens. And we all know how I feel about exchanges, so this is definitely one to keep in mind, as how you can keep it secure. So overall, QNT isn't one that I have personally invested into. I just wanted to take a look into it and see what I could find out, because it's one that I have known of for a little while. I don't think that it's a bad project at all. I think it's definitely more of just kind of a sleeping coin, if that's what we would call it, that just hasn't really woken up just yet. I've seen some pretty wild predictions out there while I have been looking into it. So I did see one on Twitter that said that worst case scenario for the bull run was 1,000 to 5,000 QNT. And that was worst case. Like, they were making predictions up to 25,000 for a bullish one, which they do get a little bit silly. And I'm not too sure if that's just a case of people are super optimistic about it, or if it's just kind of an attention grabbing thing. But as it was on Twitter, I'm not too sure what they would gain from it, so I'm going to go with it. They are just very, very optimistic. Personally, I don't see it going that high. I'm not even sure if it would reach $1,000 this bull run. For me, I do see it as more of a long-term hold. So it is a project that is still developing, it is still building. There are the partnerships happening with the central banks, etc. I think if you're just looking to make a kind of a quick buck in the bull run, this might not be the project for you, as I'm not convinced that it will do fantastic this bull run. I think it maybe needs a little longer. But let me know what your thoughts are on QNT below. Are you a holder of it? What do you think it can go to this bull run? And I will see you in the next one. Bye.